So if we think about us as a business, why do we like Power BI? Well, we like Power BI because it's really good for visualizations. You know, you think of all of the messages in the code I spoke about earlier. Once we've cleansed the data, we know it's ready to use. Before data is cleansed, Power BI will still let you draw really good visuals, but that's actually a bad thing because you don't actually know whether your data is right. So once we get these things out, we inherently have all of these security options to the database and the cube. So if you think, well, I want to see this person is only responsible for these sort of things, they can, that comes through. Likewise, if we're thinking about pulling things through very quickly, you know, how do you put things into the service? What's the best way to do it? What do we prefer to do? So one of the things we're going to start with is just having a look at a normal Power BI report in the desktop. So I'm going to talk about how you use them. I'm not going to show you how to create these reports, but I'm going to focus a few things on standards, layouts, how you can be consistent throughout, because one of the key things you would have seen is that throughout all of our different areas, we've got the insurance and finance and shipping, all of the different areas follow the same sort of layout. So essentially I'm just opening this because this is a report which is built on real fake data, so it was real data which I've aliased and multiplied by a range of whatever. But essentially we're pulling in a similar structure to what we always have inside of our applications. So we're looking here and we're thinking, right, this is good, I've created this and I want to share it with my colleagues, or I need to give this to someone. So how do I do that? Well, there's a couple of ways, but there's one really important thing we need to consider. Even though I can publish to, so I'm logged into Power BI, and even though I can publish, and well, I'm not, I will log in, even though I can publish to the service, and the service is really the cloud in which we have everything, I need to consider, well, can I actually access that data source? It's no good me just putting these reports into the ether. I need to think about where I'm going to get the connection from. So I'm going to just publish this, and we're going to expect an error message. So this is me being brave, by the way. So it's going to tell me I can publish this, but that's because I've already put it in there, that's fine. But it's going to say you haven't got a data set. So yeah, the report's in there, but you open it up, I'm not going to work. It's just going to give you a load of broken messages, which you know what is fine because I haven't set up that thing. So while I'm going to be setting this up in the service, Baha is just going to talk you through the notion of what is the gateway. So essentially the gateway is how we connect the data sources to our reports. So I'll let Baha take over and talk about that while I set that up.
So basically what the gateway is it facilitates user access remotely to an organization's private network. So if I'm a user and want to access data sources on the private network, I'd have to go through the enterprise gateway to actually query the data, and that data will be fetched back by the Power BI cloud service so I can view my reports and they're always up to date. So basically what Andy's going to do now is add a new data source to that gateway. For demonstration purposes, we've already installed the gateway on the server machine, but basically it's very easy, to set up. It takes about maximum 5 minutes. But now what we're doing is using step 2, which is adding the data source to that gateway.
So just before Baha goes on, you actually see from our drop down we've got a few things set up already. And these are just things we have on our server. So we're not pulling everything through. We're saying these are the things we want to put into the service. If there's things that you don't have to share it. But for something like this, I need to think, right, I have these new things, so what do I actually need to do to get some new data sources? So I'm already connected, I can say add a data source. So I'll let you talk again.
So one of the first steps adding a data source is obviously the data source name, your data warehouse that you'll be using to connect to the MI application, data source type, server name, and the exact database name. And also one of the key aspects of adding the data source to the gateway is adding credentials. So these credentials basically authorize the Power BI service to connect to the server and fetch data back into the service to display to the user.
So I just need to type in
just username and password.
Yeah, sorry, Baha, just so if you think of the Microsoft model here is Power BI is a web-based service. So you go into Power BI and all you've got is the visualization tool there by default. But it recognises that we may have built a lot of on-premise databases for you, which are cubes or data warehouses. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to just be able to connect to those willy-nilly, which is what Microsoft uses, the free enterprise gateway, which is what these guys are setting up here, that then allows you to authenticate. So it's almost like Microsoft saying, we'll own the front-end part of it, but we want authentication to go on-prem. And unless you install the gateway, there's obviously no way you can connect, which hence is for the bulletproof security.
Yeah, I think probably I have. Yep. Well spotted. I was testing you, making sure you're paying attention. Still can't spell it right. Ticks. got my contacts in, that's the worst thing about it. Right, so what's happening in the ether, this is going to go away and create a new connection, or has created a new connection to our new data source. At the bottom you'll see we've got an EiB tonnage. Now one last thing I need to do is just thinking about, this is just something we have to do in our environment. It's just because we use a user on our domain, which is spelt wrong again, we actually have to define something, which is, this is more of a technical thing just to make sure we can access. So I'm very quickly going to add this in.
Because the purpose of using mapping, UPN mapping, is basically sometimes organizations allow their users to sign in with their different email address from the organization account. So basically what this does is when the user wants to authenticate on the service, it'll just replace the text excelbusiness.com to at excelbusiness.local, now allowed to actually authenticate the user on the server.
Right, so one of the faults in PowerBI is that when you actually select OK, it just does it, but it doesn't close the form or anything. So I've selected OK, that's there. And if I wanted to go back and check, I'll just click off somewhere else. I can go into tonnage again. Thank you. It's going to tell me it might take a little bit of time, which is fine, because it means that I can go through and show you a few things before we then check that report again. So the few of the things we want to talk about are, standards. How do we keep things similar? And we actually see things throughout. So we're actually looking at just a couple of reports. So we have a layout template and a PowerBI templates. So all the difference is we have a standard set of reports, which really is just all of the visualizations in a specific size, which we use frequently. So we've got the colors in there, the things which are important to us. We always have the logo in the top left and the title, and the slices along the left. And this is true if you look along the bottom, there's all different types of visualizations we've applied this to. Now the reason why we do this is because when you change a data source, the colors are forgotten. So things like the layout will be retained, but if you change colors, for example, so if you change what was going into the report, so if we look at here, I'm looking at net M by periods and description, if that ever changed on a different data source, the colors are gone. So it's just a good reference points to go and pick up the colors you require. Then if we think about, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not really that worried about the colors because it's not really that important to me, I just want the layout, then we have something as the layout template. So from here, I've just got what I have, the KPI at the top right, we quite like to have our slices again, and then the same out with nothing in the real estate. So the next thing we need to think about is, well, now we've got common layouts and a bit of consistency in displays, why don't we actually start looking at our dashboards? So in our insurance workspace, and workspace is really just where you group your reports and things along those lines, we have two different dashboards. So we have a broker one and an insurance, but before we get into there, we can see we have underlying reports. So if I wanted to click on one of these reports and just see it standalone, I can do. So I'm going to open this one up, and essentially this is just looking at demo data. We've got our same sort of format, and then if I want to slice and dice, I can do. So if I said to here, I'm not interested in this financial year, I want to see the one before, I can do, and it will go away and redraw that information for me. What's also quite nice about these reports is that if I hover over any different unit, I actually get something called a tooltip. So because I have these three attributes, we call them, or things, is perfectly fine in the chart, that's going to tell me what it is. But sometimes I want a bit more information. So I don't just want to see those things which are inherently there, I want to add to it. So if we go on to the next one, we'll be able to see added things in. Now if you think EGNPI and those loss ratios aren't actually in the chart, but if I want to see the answer, it's already there. And it's this thought process of, well, how can I then have another layer on top of the charts I already have? If I go further, we can actually put charts on charts. So although that one isn't the greatest example of a chart on chart, we can do that to answer certain questions. And then why not a hybrid of the two? Why don't we think, well, we can have a chart which shows us one thing and some KPIs with it. And these are all interactive as well, so if I wanted to go and change and hover over a different ordinate, that will change. And likewise, cause and effect. If I want to see, well, at this point, I want to see the effect of this point on all of the charts. If I click on it, it'll go and show me that as well. So very quickly, I've got quite a lot of answers to a lot of questions I may or may not have with just clicking. I'm not doing anything specific. So from a user example, that's really, really good. Likewise with slices, if we were thinking about, I'll just deselect that so we've got everything back. What about if I want to look at more than one thing? So I've got all these regions, but I want to see, I don't know, maybe just all of the North and Scotland. Just control click. That'll go away and redraw it. Nice and easy, nice and straightforward. There's nothing too complicated there. So I've got quite a big scope of what I can use and how I can pick things up, and hopefully some of you may have noticed that this net premium always updates. So no matter what I have selected, that will always give me the net premium for the selections. So just, oh, excuse me, if I just select that back, we'll see this chart redraw and we get the dynamic thing. So again, keeping KPIs in the same place we're drawn, to the point I think Paul made earlier about where do you look in a dashboard for key information.
Andrew, can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
So in the preparation of these reports, you can predetermine what level of information you want to supply to a chosen business partner. It could be capacity or broker.
Yeah.
And you can automate those reports that just literally fire out on any given day?
Well, the nice thing is they're always in the service. So one of the things we use is a OneDrive integration. So we keep the master copy saved on OneDrive, and if we ever need to make changes to that, we just save it on OneDrive and PowerBI knows what to do with it. Even if we then have it within dashboards, it will still know to give those away. With regards to what brokers can see, if they just want to see their own brokering things, if you set that up in the cube, it inherently comes through into Power BI, so there's no real need to go and set it up again.
Right.
So if you prepare the back end, the front end of Power BI really is a plug-and-play sort of tool, and that's where we find a lot of use with it, because we know that we've cleansed the data at this point. There's no real risk of us, well, we need to add this calculation in. We'll just go and put it in the ETL section, and when we build the cube. But coming to the user point of view, I can access this, and I'll show you afterwards because we're running out of time. I can access all of these things on my phone as well. I can pick these up and run through them as well. So you have got a lot of flexibility. And I mean, we're just plugging these things on cubes, but we can build tabular models. You can actually just plug into SQL tables.
We might even want to keep it simple by sending standard documents. Some of our brokers run on gas, let alone electric. So they wouldn't necessarily want it more complicated than just some simple headline numbers.
Yeah, then you can.
But that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of visualizations in it. So if I think in the filters, it might show me. No, it's not. It's filter based. So in the visualizations, if we edit the report, I'll show you another time. You can change all of these. You just have KPIs in there. One of the other things I'll also show you, which is a good point, is that we've set some things up in Cortana, which is a really I quite like what it does, but I'm also thinking who actually really does that. So I'm actually got a bit of a cheat sheet here because I always forget. I know. No, apparently about it, I'm afraid. So if I go into Cortana, I'm not going to talk to Cortana, but I can paste these things in, and it will say, what is this? It will go and check on the web, and then eventually it will give me a little data set so I can pick this up and then have a look. So one of these key things is you might not need to go into Power BI every day, but if you have the Cortana integration, you can quickly see, for example, KPIs. If there is something standing out, you think, well, I need to go and have a look, I instantly know without having to go into Power BI. The integration is always there. And this is essentially a Power BI report, just a really small one. That's all. It's exactly the same thing, and it's published to the service. One of the other things we can do, this isn't actually the service, we'll go back to the service. One of the other things we can do is actually query language. So Paul showed you a bit earlier, I think he showed you earlier, that we can ask questions of the existing data. So if I go onto one of my dashboards, and a dashboard is essentially a grouping of objects from the report. So you can have 5 different reports and group things. So something here, this is just, the reason why I'm showing you this one is because the only one I've actually developed the QA on. So you get the standard things like we have here, so I could select them and put them in. But I might say, that's all well and good, but I want to see a profit and loss summary by cost center for a specific cost center. Now this is going to go away and actually get me a sheet of all of that information. So I don't just see a graphic, I actually see a lot of context. I can see my year, I can see what I have. And likewise, I might want to change this to administration. I can put that in, and it will intuitively understand and change that for me on the fly. So I'm actually, again, getting a lot of answers. I've set this up in the back end, obviously. But if you're thinking of a user perspective, you can set this up yourself. It's really straightforward to do so, and then you can set these up. And people have so much power with Power BI as well. I mean, our reports are good for, if you think you want to get into the nitty-gritty in detail, use Report Studio. If you're looking at summary and just quick answers, Power BI, we're not going to compete with that because it does it so well. We want to build our own thing. Let's adopt something which is growing. And you look at the Gartner matrix Paul showed earlier, we can't really argue with the results because they are doing really, really well.
Also, can I just add to that, Andy?
Sure,
with
go
this
for it.
interface, basically reduces the learning curves for users. So if they're used to using natural language, you don't actually have to possess a lot of IT technical knowledge to be able to actually produce these reports.
What's also really nice about these sort of queries, if I just go onto the broker again, I'm going back to my cheat sheet purely because I've got these set up. So if I go here and say, well, give me the answer to this question, it's actually gone and drawn a chart for me on the fly. I don't have to worry about anything else, but I can actually say, well, this is all really good, but I don't like that visualization. I want to see it as a tree map. So I've already opened it up. I can set it as a tree map. Right, that's brilliant. I want to pin this to my dashboard now, okay? Pin the visual. It's going to pin it to my dashboard for me, so next time I come in or anyone comes in, that's in the dashboard. It can't let me do it yet, so Obviously, Power BI doesn't like me doing that, but essentially you can pin these things to your dashboard and then you've got more context. So again, you can actually narrow things down. Instead of just seeing a matrix and a big KPI and a chart, you can add to the content as well. So one of the last things that I just want to show you is the drill down capability of Power BI. I touched on it in the hotel session, but this is a good and bad. I quite like the way it does work because it does always start off at the top end of things, but you quickly can get to a really, really slow response time. So I'll just flip over to this P&L drill down. I've actually just got a small matrix of things, but you see I've got a drop down of rows and columns. So I wait for this to draw and I'm thinking, well, I want to see things by a certain date, which are in my columns, I can drill down, and if I'm in my rows, I can as well. But you'll quickly see that depending on what's happening in the service, it can take a bit of time. So we're looking at this, it's probably worth me abandoning this because you've seen this drawn before anyway. But if we just go back to the workspace, and I think I published that tonnage report somewhere around here, and hopefully it's caught up with us. So I'll go to reports. If this has come through okay, I should be able to open my tonnage report. This is going to load data, and because I've set the gateway up, this is now going to draw and load everything. So beforehand, I should have shown you before, it would have loaded with a load of red X's saying I can't show you this data. But now because I've set it, I can actually open things up and it's all interactive. So I can go to my previous year and pick things up. Example, there wasn't anything in the previous year there, so it's not the best example to show, but essentially you get what I'm trying to get there. So a combination of using the cleansing, using the ETL that we have in the back end, using AppStudio, really, really good, and then plug and play. Put the thing on top, you inherit everything already in there, and it's quite easy to produce these sort of reports. So because we're such an organised company, I built most of these yesterday, as did Baha. So it's not going to take you hours and hours to do it as long as you follow the simple tips. Well, you know. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, Baha?
What I wanted to add is really the main advantage of using Power BI as a cloud deployment is basically what it does is actually hooks up to your existing IT infrastructure. Basically, it can identify the users on your domain, who's authenticated, you know, to actually read certain data sources, cube security. So basically, it just saves time, effort, and costs.